but I think it's an insult to their users to have such a bad user experience.
Three of us could agree that RSCs are basically the most, the hottest topic right now.
No tool that has been released recently that is more impactful than AI and AI-assisted programming. AI-assisted programming is the future, and you need to develop those skills. So that's what I'm doing.
Hello everybody, welcome to the next episode of the NextGen Web Podcast. Today I'm joined by Jacob.
Hi, I'm JJ, I'm a head of integration at Blazity.
So in today's episode we have a special guest, the one and only Kent C. Dodds. In a case, if you may not yet be familiar with the impact of Kent in the React ecosystem and the community, Kent is the co-founder of Remix. He's an educator. He's an author of the Epic Web and Epic React courses. So we are super stoked to have Kent here on the podcast. I think it's going to be a great discussion. It's a huge pleasure, a huge honor to have you here on the podcast. So yeah, maybe Kent, if you'd like to add some few words about yourself and maybe some fun fact, I think it would be great for the audience.
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Kent C. Dodds. I live in Utah in the United States with my wife and 5 children. And I am a full-time educator. I left PayPal to pursue my education dream. Goodness, I think it's been almost 6 years now. It's been a long time that I've been teaching. Even before that, I was teaching and traveling all over. Even I was actually just in Poland recently. And helping people build better web applications. My primary things that I teach are testing with testingjavascript.com, and then I launched epicreact.dev, which just got a major update. And then I also have epicweb.dev, where I teach full stack web development. Primarily, it's all pretty much React stuff. But it's Epic Web is a full stack thing, so there's a lot of backend stuff going on there too. But it's all JavaScript and TypeScript sort of thing. That's kind of where I hang out. So I also created a testing library, which a lot of UI engineers use for testing their components in whatever framework they use. That was actually adopted as the default query for Playwright, and a lot of people are using Playwright now too. Mm-hmm. And I manage and maintain a lot of packages on NPM as well. So that is, and I like you mentioned, I also co-founded Remix. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit today, so I won't go too deep into that. But I've done a number of things.
You are the creator of the Epic Web Dev course. You also did great courses on React. You also are an organizer of the Epic Web Conf. I believe the next edition is coming in March. Correct me if I'm wrong. So maybe we can have a quick stop here. I think it would be super interesting to have some insights, both on the conference, but also we know that React had some big changes. So I believe the course also includes a lot of these stuff that are coming in React. So maybe we can have a quick stop and just talk about the things that are coming both in courses and the conference.
Yeah, sure. So React 19 was just released. And so in preparation for that, I launched Epic React v2. And so all of epicreact.dev is using React 19, including the React Server Component feature. We are going to talk about Next a little bit later, but I think that I'll just mention that in Epic React v2, even though Next.js is currently the only major framework that supports React Server Components, I don't use Next.js, and so for that workshop where we talk about React Server Components, we actually build our own framework to really get a deep understanding of how React Server Components work. So that's exciting stuff going on there. At the same time, React Router just got a version 7 release, and that's the evolution of Remix. So now Remix and React Router are one and the same. And so there are a couple of changes to Remix that have happened and require an update to epicweb.dev. So I'm thinking in 2025, I'll probably be updating Epic Web. There are some upcoming things that the Remix team are working on as well. So I'm thinking about waiting for some of those. Everything that you're learning in Epic Web right now is still applicable to React Router. There are just a few minor changes in how some of the APIs work under the hood, but the basic concepts are all still applicable. So that one can hang out for a little bit and still be quite relevant. As far as the conference goes, I started when I was at Remix. I'm no longer at Remix, but while I was there, I was in charge of the developer experience and community. And so one of the first things that I did when I joined was I joined right about the time that they open source. So I wasn't a founder in the sense that I was there at the very beginning as a founder. I was involved in the creation of Remix, but as more of a consultant, sort of unofficially. And so, yeah, as soon as I joined, we open sourced Remix, and then I decided we needed to have a conference. And so I organized Remix Conf. That was in 2023. And then I got things ready for, actually, no, that would have been 22. And then I got things ready for 23 before we sold to Shopify. And about the time that we sold to Shopify is when I left Remix to go back to teaching full-time. And so then a few months later, they reached out to me and said, hey, a few months after I left, they reached out to me again and said, hey, do you want to run RemixConf as an external consultant for Shopify? Because I guess I did a good enough job for year one. And so I ran the second conference for Remix in 2023. And then after that, Shopify decided that they wanted to focus their efforts on ReactConf itself, because they want to more align themselves just with as a framework for React and not have a whole separate conference themselves. And so they were the premier sponsor for ReactConf, but that left RemixConf not happening. And at around the same time, I've been thinking about eventually doing an Epic Web Conf. I knew I wanted to do that eventually. And so I decided, okay, well, if we're not going to do a conference for Remix, I'll just evolve it into Epic Web Conf. And so that became Epic Web Conf for this year, 2024. And that went super well. And so we're going to do it again. So as far as preparations for that, it's going super well. The CFP actually ends today. And I just looked, we have almost 200 submissions to that. So yeah, so I've got a lot of work to do to go through that over the next week or so and select the speakers. Last year, I actually handpicked every speaker. This year, I decided to open a CFP. So yeah, so there's a lot to do. Still, by the time you listen to this, I'll probably still be still have sponsorship slots available. So reach out if you're interested, and it's going to be a ton of fun in Utah in March.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Seems that you have a very busy time right now, both with the courses and the conference. I think we are super excited to see the updated version, especially because we also seen that on one of the conferences, they talk about the RSCs and also the concept of building a framework in order to understand such a complex topic, which is the RSCs. I think it resonated with a lot of people. So having that included in the course, I think it's great. And just by like every developer know that simply by building stuff, that's the best way to actually learn. So super excited for that. And also, you mentioned one of the topics that we also wanted to talk about today, which was the merge of the Remix with the React Router version 7. So as we know, these two were like tightly coupled together before. So it seemed like kind of like obvious path to take to merge Remix and React Router. And I think we could have like a little stop here and maybe just like talk about the upcoming update of React Router 7. Because it's also a huge thing. So maybe Kent, if you could like leave some insights on the like decisions on merging the Remix and React Router and like what's coming in the new version.
Yeah. So I have been away from the Remix team for over 2 years now. It's hard to believe. But in that, even before I left Remix, we were considering merging React Router and Remix because Remix was just a kind of a wrapper around React Router that added some conventions with the file system and a compiler or like a build, like a built-in build tool with the ESBuild, and eventually that evolved into Vite. And so like there wasn't, and there were a couple other features like loaders and actions and things that were unique to Remix. But over time, we moved lots of those features into React Router. And actually at the time that we did that, when we brought loaders and actions into React Router, we considered putting them all into a single repo and having a single documentation site and everything. But there were enough differences and things that it just kind of didn't feel quite right at the time. And so we didn't do that. But after I left, they continued to bring more and more things into React Router, such that the only unique thing that was in Remix was the Vite plugin. We moved from a custom ESBuild thing to Vite. And so it was basically Remix was just React Router with a Vite plugin. And so by moving the Vite plugin into the React Router repo, Remix just kind of dissolved into nothing. There's nothing left that distinguishes it from React Router. And the other aspect of this is like we could have gone the other direction. We talked about saying, okay, how about React Router goes away and now Remix is the thing because it has such a really strong brand and everything. It's really, really awesome. But the fact is that a lot of people, just a massive amount of people are using React Router and really happy with it. And they also are eyeing the future of React and server functions and server components and all of that. And so they want to be able to get there, but they're on a React Router app. So how do they get there? And so we decided we wanted to make the migration as simple as possible and let them, instead of having them say, well, okay, boss, we want to get this future React wonderful stuff, so we need to migrate from React Router to Remix. It was a lot easier for them to say, we just need to keep our dependencies up to date. Let's upgrade to Remix version 7 or to React Router version 7. That's just a lot easier to sell an update of a dependency than it is to sell a migration to a new framework. And so while React Router can still be used in the way that it always was before, it's still client-side routing if you want to do it that way, and you can still use whatever bundler or build tool that you have. Like there's no requirement to using the Vite plugin or using SSR or anything. But by bringing all of this stuff into React Router, it made it so that people could pick and choose those different features and like over time migrate to those features. And eventually, actually, hopefully very soon, maybe by the end of this year, I can't give you deadlines or anything. I'm not on the Remix team anymore. But by the end of the year, I think React Router v7 will support React Server components as well, and so that and server functions. And so what that means is that people who are on an old version of React Router, even version 5, we'll be able to use this special package that we made to make that migration easier to go from version 5 to version 6. And then they can incrementally adopt these new features and upgrade to version 7, which actually is there were no breaking changes with version 7. And so it's a pretty straightforward path to get to the future of React, which I think is really valuable. And then the only sad part about that is the Remix brand is so strong and so great that it's kind of sad to lose. And so the Remix team is currently working on a project. Their code term for it is Reverb. And Reverb will be rebranded to Remix when it's ready. But it's a new framework that's built from scratch with like the current version of React that we have now with React Server Components and functions. So like let's rethink everything, start from scratch with the current state of the way that React is now that it has functions, server functions, and server components, and see what kind of a framework we can build with that. So I'm really excited about that in particular. I think that is going to be the killer framework, which hopefully will come out sometime early next year. I really have no insight into that directly, but yeah. So anyway, that's kind of in answer to your question. That's kind of what led to that choice. Consolidation is a good thing, and we've got more stuff to look forward to in the future.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. Well, obviously, as you mentioned, like the React router was kind of the obvious choice for the SPAs in regard of routing. So having the possibility to take advantage of the old package and also the new kind of wave which is coming to React with the RSCs and the server actions actually seems like a great move. So we are like really excited for that. To see how it turns out in the future, and also for the Remix brand. I remember that on some of your streams, you also had like a great neon sign in the background of your room. So it's great that the branding is kept alive. I think that it looked really cool. So we are really looking forward to the future, how it turns out on the release.
Yeah, that sign, by the way, I should have mentioned. My room looks very bare right now because I'm actually moving in the next week or two, and so I'm just packing everything up. But I do still have the sign. I also have an Epic Web Dev sign too that will find a new home in my new home.
Nice, great. Sure. So I think in the topic of the React Router version 7, one of the articles you have on your blog, which is very interesting, also covers a term such as the PESPA, which would be the Progressive Enhanced SPAs. So I think that it's a term that's not very widely used in the web world. So maybe in the context which we are in, so the meta frameworks with React Router version 7 and Next, for example, I think maybe we can briefly talk about what actually the PESPA architecture is, and maybe what led the current state of JavaScript and overall the web development to kind of evolve to the PESPAs, because we think that this article had some great insights, both on how the web evolved and the current architecture, which basically helps developers to have the best of the two worlds, which is the server and the client. So I think we can have a quick stop and maybe just talk about the architecture and maybe the evolution of web, which led to the PESPAs we have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So early on in the web, when it was just pretty much documents, you had links for getting to different pages and then forms for submitting data. And forms were part of the original HTML spec. So that we've had mutations on the web since the beginning. And as you submit forms, it's pretty much a navigation that has a payload associated to it. And so you have full page refreshes when you're navigating, full page refreshes when you submit things, and those full page refreshes cause a number of issues with performance and user experience. And so we moved to and that age, and there are actually lots of apps that are still built this way, but we call that the multi-page app type of architecture. Where each page you go to is a separate download, a separate document. And to improve that user experience a little bit, we went to the progressively enhanced multi-page app. So the architecture is still basically the same, but we added some JavaScript in the client so that we don't have to do the full page refresh. So we'd prevent the default behavior of the form. We'd make the requests manually using XHR HTTP requests, and And then we'd get the response and we'd update the page with JavaScript rather than having everything reload. That fixed a number of problems, but it introduced a new problem where you generate the HTML document on the server, and then you're updating it on the client, and so you can very easily end up in inconsistencies. So there are a lot of bugs around that, and also duplication of code. Sorry, what?
Yeah, sorry, just to cut in a little bit. This is the era of the jQuery and Ajax you're talking about, right? So
Yep.
Yeah, so the web, how many people just like were introduced to web development, and now it just looks completely different.
Yeah, it was around like 2006 is when XHRs really came onto the scene, and Gmail was one of the first to. Well, actually, I think Outlook, Microsoft Outlook, was one of the first to really show what that could do. It really blew our minds. I remember in that time, like Google Maps was just like, what the heck? So super impressive stuff. But it came at a massive cost for the developer because they had all this duplication and stuff.
Yep.
And so the thought was, well, we could get rid of this duplication if we just do all of our templates on the client. So instead of having anything generated by the server, we'll just generate everything on the client. And now the server is just a simple REST API, and the client makes all network requests to get data and everything. And this is around the time that Backbone became popular. I built a SPA in Backbone. We call this a single page app, SPA. So I built an SPA in Backbone. One of my first, actually it was my first job out of college, was building a SPA with Backbone. And then AngularJS came on the scene. Ember kind of made some noise a little bit, but they didn't really get too far. And then React came onto the scene and blew everybody away, and it was amazing. And React has actually always had support for server rendering, but very few people ever did that because it was just, I guess we didn't really think too much about it, to be honest. We had already decided we didn't care about progressive enhancement anymore. But there are a lot of problems with going the route of a single page app from both a user experience as well as a developer experience standpoint. And so like just as an example, for the user experience, you have to download the entire app before the user can see anything. And so if you have an app that has a lot of dynamic information, the user's just looking at a loading spinner until the thing loads. And then you add on top of that the desire for us to co-locate our data requirements with the code that requires that data. And that means that if you properly chunk up your app into multiple bundles, so that the user's not downloading the entire app all at once and waiting for that, you have to go fetch the code, and then that code fetches the data. And so you get this waterfall effect, like that data renders, and then, oh, there's another thing I need to fetch. And so now we'll fetch that code, and now we're going to fetch that data, and then that will render, and it just keeps going. It's a really bad user experience. And you see this everywhere on the web today, especially banks. Banks that like tried to be modern in the teens, like 20 teens, by like building a SPA, and then you just see like spinners just everywhere.
Yeah. I would say
airlines are the same way, like just really, really slow and bad experience. So that made the user experience bad, but it also made the developer experience really challenging too, because we're preventing defaults on the forms. It turns out the browser does a lot with forms and mutations, and so this means okay, we're going to request the data, but we have like some state living in here in memory. The state is like a cache of what's on the server. So we have to properly update that cache, and caching is one of the most hard problems in computer science. And so it's this has been a massive challenge for us over the last couple of years. And that has kind of gotten us in, both the user experience problems and the developer experience problems have moved us into this new phase that I am calling the PESPA architecture, progressively enhanced single page apps. So it is still the same idea where you request a document one time and then the client-side JavaScript keeps the page up to date, but it's progressively enhanced because it's server rendered and all of the forms and links and everything work. Even if the JavaScript hasn't loaded yet. And that's that's not necessarily a like requirement or a really important thing, because users are going to have JavaScript. It doesn't matter whether you actually require JavaScript to submit stuff. But by having that architecture, you end up with a simpler developer experience, because you no longer have to worry about the server cache. It's all managed for you by the framework. And so because you have this constraint where, well, it has to work without JavaScript. So if you are storing state in client-side JavaScript, well, that's not going to work. And so the framework manages that for you, so that you don't have to worry about whether or not you're keeping the state updated or whatever. And so this is what Remix did for me over the last couple of years. Well, let's see. They released in the end of 2020 in developer preview. So I've been using this for 4 years now. And it's just beautiful. It feels like building a multi-page app, which is a really, really simple architecture, but it gives me the capabilities of a modern framework where I can have really nice pending states, a really nice optimistic UI, make my application feel super duper snappy. And so that is kind of where we are right now, I think, with most frameworks supporting this PESPA type architecture, which I do think that we are kind of morphing that into something else now with React Server Components and server functions. But the basic idea is the same, that we have a single page application that is server rendered with all the dynamic data in place that you want to. You do have the power and ability to stream in different pieces of that page, so you can still end up with spinners all over the place. But you also have the lever of saying, no, I don't want a spinner there. We're going to wait for that data before we send the document. And you just have a lot more power. And I credit Remix for making this industry move to this direction.
Large corporation even can get away still without handling the forms on the server side?
Well, clearly they can. YouTube is massive, and I don't think it is getting smaller. But I think it's an insult to their users to have such a bad user experience. Another good example of YouTube having a bad user experience is if, for me, my theme changes throughout the day. So I'm light mode during the daytime and then dark mode at night. And so if I go to YouTube in the daytime, it's in light mode, and then I go to YouTube in the evening, you show up on the page and it's all light mode, and then the JavaScript shows up and it realizes, oh, I'm in the wrong mode. And so it updates the URL, adds a query string that says theme refresh equals true, and then it refreshes the page so that it can be in the right mode. And I hate it so much, and it bothers me every single time. So I need somebody to convince me that YouTube cares about user experience, because I don't think they do. I think that I mean, it hurts my experience. At the same time, I complain about stuff on the web all the time, and my wife is like, I don't even notice. So maybe it's just like a curse of being a web developer, is that you care about these sorts of things. But I think that user experience actually does matter a lot. Even if she doesn't notice, I think that she would feel less stressed and annoyed if the software worked better.
Yeah, sure. And I can imagine that the worst case scenario of JavaScript kicking in afterwards for the user experience is actually the theme switching, which affects the UI of the whole page. So for sure, if somebody from YouTube is listening to that, you can take care of that. I'm pretty sure that the modern tools allow to handle the state properly and propagate the theme. So hopefully, maybe you're gonna see this working properly in the future.
Yeah. I built a solution for this for my own site. And it is, I published it as a library on NPM. It's under the Epic Web org called Client Hints. And it's based on a spec called Client Hints that allow the server to tell the browser what things it needs to know to be able to render properly. because the browser is going to send a bunch of information by default in headers for like user agent and stuff, but it doesn't send other things like the user's preferred currency or their preferred theme or their time zone, stuff like that. And if you depend on that stuff for what you display to the user, rather than having like hiding that stuff and then showing it when JavaScript shows up and you can access that information, you just have the server tell the browser, hey, these are the things that I need. The browser will send another request with that in the headers, and then the server can render that. And so what my library does is kind of simulate this using cookies. And so you take a little bit of JavaScript at the very top of your document, and it will compare the cookies that it has to see whether they're still accurate. So if the theme is changed, then it will say, oh, your theme changed. So let's trigger a refresh. We'll set the cookie and then trigger a refresh. So now the server knows the proper values for these. And so that actually is sort of similar to what YouTube does, except YouTube waits until the entire document is there. And then it is like, oh my gosh, we sent them the wrong document. And then it refreshes. Whereas my approach, you don't even see the document before the refresh happens because the script is literally just at the top. And so that's the thing. It's like both of these situations are so easy to fix. Like they just, whatever logic they have around the theme refresh, just move that to the head of your document. And now the user won't even see the page until after that refresh has happened. And then same with the search. Just don't prevent the default behavior, and it will work. They like delete code. That is the solution for that. Like I can't understand it. It's just insane to me.
Yeah, exactly. And like a lot of problems in React can be actually solved by just like proper component composition even. So as you said, like deleting the code and like proper architecture of where we use the fetches or just accessing the data, just the proper composition, I would say is the key debugging skill for the React dev. So yeah, I think that's a good catch here. And also just like coming back to the whole like PESPA architecture, I've also heard that a lot of people saying that, okay, we are kind of making a full circle back to the PHP times, where we just like take advantage of the server-side rendering. But a lot of people kind of forget that in the PESPA architecture, we are actually taking advantage of the best solutions from both the client and the server side. And like the whole architecture about collocating the server code and the client code like allows to provide the best both user experience and the developer experience. And as we know, the good developer experience can also tend quite often to increased user experience. So these both are like correlated. So I think that's also like a pretty important thing to mention about the PESPA architecture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when people say, "Oh, we're just circling back to PHP," they're forgetting that it's not so much a circle; it's more like an upward spiral where we continue to make it better. So yes, this does resemble that older architecture, and that's what makes it so great. But we brought with us all of the beautiful composition that we get with React, and it is still a single page app. And so we get the really nice utilities for a like optimistic UI and pending states in the right like places. And then with the right frameworks, you can have race conditions managed nicely, and there are a lot of performance characteristics that are better. And then on top of all that, like PHP can now do that. Like they have this inertia thing that makes it quite a nice experience. So I feel like where PHP is now, or specifically Laravel, they're pretty much in line with what Next.js and Remix are capable of. Although I would say that I can't really speak to Next.js because I don't use that framework. But I know that from like a fundamentals perspective, React server components and server functions are a brand new capability that you cannot get with anything else that I'm aware of. I can't imagine that you could possibly get this with anything that's not in JavaScript either. And that is the ability to compose different pieces of code as simply as like rendering a React component. So you can render this server component, and as a child, it has a client component, and as a child of that, you have another server component. And what this enables is some like integrations between stuff that needs to happen on the client because we're doing dynamic, interesting things in the browser, composing that nicely with stuff that needs to access the database or get data from third party or whatever with private keys and stuff. And so I do think that yes, it does resemble PHP, but it has some characteristics to it that are effectively impossible with anything else.
Right, thank you for that. I think that it's great that we had a good definition of the PESPA. I think a lot of people that are listening, especially with the rapid pace of development of the new features we are getting, it's vital to have a good understanding of what is the new wave. So I'm very happy that we had this discussion here. I think a lot of people are going to have like a better understanding now of the PESPA architecture. And I think that's a great term to kind of describe the new trend we are having right now. So yeah, super happy that we have that covered. And in the context of the PESPA architecture, we know that you're a super busy person, both with the conferences, with the education, all of the stuff that is going around. We were also wondering if you maybe were following the changes that were made in the Next.js ecosystem, maybe the updates that were coming, the version 15. Not sure, maybe if you have some insights here, if you had some time to follow on the other side of the frameworks, how maybe Next.js was evolving in the past time.
Well, so if I'm not mistaken, Next.js is still on version 14, yep. Right? And but I think they've announced 15, something like that. Yep. I do follow it just a little bit, but not much. The way I feel about it is kind of that there's just so much to keep up with that you kind of have to choose what you decide is important to you. And so, yeah, I've chosen not to follow Next.js too closely. So I'm not sure that I can give you much useful information on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, with the pace, both React, Remix, and Next are evolving. It's pretty hard to be on track of all of the changes. But for example, both me and Jacob have read the blog posts regarding the Remix, the Next.js comparison. We find it super useful. There were a lot of key points that can give a better understanding on the framework. We also read the post that was made by Lee Robb. So we found that this type of comparison was super insightful for the devs that sometimes decide which framework they should choose. As you said, there are so many changes that sometimes you have to kind of pick one. But for example, I'm not sure if you would be familiar, for example, with the teaching that Lee Robb did. So basically, we had some improvements on the self-hosting from the Next.js side. So we had the full guide starting from basic VPS, which is super cheap, all the way to the Kubernetes clusters. So I was just wondering about your opinion on the moves that Next.js took in order to kind of open to the self-hosting. Maybe have some insights on the recent moves that Next.js was taking to improve the self-hosting platform.
Yeah. When I publish, so I have my blog post, I think you were mentioning, titled "Why I Won't Use Next.js" on Epic Web. I actually I removed that from the article's listing page because it's a little bit harsher than I typically like to be. But it is a question that I get asked all the time, and so I wanted to write it down and publish that. And so, yeah, one of the things that I talk about is how Next.js is not very independent from Vercel. And so like my example there is that a project called OpenNext exists, and it's basically a project that makes Next hostable like on your own, specifically in an AWS Lambda the environment. In fact, I think that's the only environment that they know about or that they support or care about. Yes. So as far as hosting it yourself on a VPS or something like that, yeah, for sure. Like you can run it locally on your machine, right? So it certainly it should be able to run in a VPS. And so I think that my concern isn't quite so much that it is possible, but that hosting it or OpenNext exists because it's very difficult to run yourself on AWS. And I know from the Netlify team, from people who worked on this, that getting Next.js to work was an enormous lift for them, and that it's a like continual area of challenge for them to keep Next.js working as they make changes. So, I mean, complex things. In the last Next.js conf, I was actually there because I happened to be in San Francisco and I've got a lot of friends over there. So I went there, and Guillermo talked about necessary complexity, or I can't remember, he didn't use the word necessary, but it was like that. Complexity that is like requisite or something. And I think that I disagree. I don't think that things have to be quite so complex. And the complexity that Next.js has is in large part because of the architectural decisions that they've made and the vertical integration that they're going for with Vercel, which you get a lot of value out of vertical integration, but it also means that trying to step outside the ecosystem is less good. For example, I use a Mac and I use AirPods for my headphones, and I use an Android device, and that like ruins the whole thing. So by not living in that ecosystem, I'm actually living an underserved world. And so I'd probably be better off to switch from Android to an iPhone and get an Apple Watch and just do everything in that ecosystem. But for various reasons, I don't want to, and so I'm kind of stuck in a less optimal scenario. Compare that with Remix, which from the very beginning was very much invested in making sure that it works everywhere as a first-class citizen, and people's experience has just been really, really great. Whether they're hosting on a serverless platform and whichever serverless platform they want, including Cloudflare Workers, or if they want to run a VPS, or if they want to run it on like a hybrid serverless long-running server environment like fly.io, which is where I run my stuff. It doesn't have those challenges. Now, when I published this post, I had a bunch of people saying, "Oh, it's really not that hard to run Next.js yourself," but they're all running in a long-running server type environment. And that's what Lee Rob has been talking about. I don't think that Lee Rob has demonstrated how to self-host your Next.js app on a serverless platform, because I believe that is still a pretty big challenge. Now, for myself, I actually don't really like serverless that much. For the vast majority of use cases, I think you're better off going with a long-running server sort of thing. But I know that a lot of people do really like serverless, and if you want to use Next.js, then you should probably be using Vercel, because it's a big pain otherwise.
Yep.
But of course, then there's all the other like problems with using Vercel, like the costs and different things like that. So it's just use Remix instead.
I think you touched on a very important point, that the whole the problem of hosting Next.js was in fact the serverless. The Docker support was for quite a while, I believe, and I know that not everyone wants that, but like you said, I also see a lot of benefits of just having a constantly running server instead of serverless. You don't have to worry about cold starts and stuff like that. I know it's mostly handled right now, and there are things to do to improve it. But yeah, we personally, I can tell you from personal experience, hosting Next.js on Kubernetes was actually quite convenient for my experience at least. But yeah, I haven't set up the serverless outside of Vercel myself, but I know that there are tools like SST that are quite there. It's been for a while, and I think they're based on OpenNext. So that's definitely a good point, that serverless hosting, it's not easy like to mimic the Vercel architecture one-to-one on your own, definitely. But going back to your article, I feel like you objectively, of course, we are a company that work with Next.js mainly, but objectively, it was a very good article. Although I'm a big fan of Next.js, so it hurt me in some points. But I feel like it's very important to talk about those things because, we have an improvement right now. For example, for the Docker implementation, the Docker hosting itself wasn't as good as documented as it is right now. So I believe it's very important to talk about it and to have this like a healthy competition, because we are still either you're using Remix or either you're using Next.js, we're still creating web apps. We're still improving the user experiences. And there was this a little bit of race between when the Remix came. I feel like it improved even Next.js quite a bit. Because, for example, the whole idea of nested routes, nested layouts wasn't really a thing in the pages router in Next.js. And now it's pretty much standard, and everyone loves it, and it's very convenient to work exactly like in React Router did a long time ago when we only had a React and SPAs.
Yeah, I think Remix has really influenced the direction of the ecosystem, in particular with forms. I know the React team credited Remix for the implementation of forms. And actually, when I was at Remix, we had meetings with the React team, and the React server components originally for the async capabilities that they had, like making a database query directly in your component, that required a wrapper around everything that you do with async. So if you had a Prisma, you'd have a Prisma ORM, and then you'd have a separate package that would wrap the Prisma ORM so that you can make queries in your React component. And you'd have a React version of fetch, a React version of everything that you would do. And it was just such a pain. And so the Remix team gave feedback and said, you need to figure out how to make this work with async await. They pushed back really hard, and now they're async await. And so the Remix team does care a great deal about React and the future there, and is very committed to what React is doing. And I think a lot of my preference for Remix is the fact that the team has been around for so long. I was actually just looking recently, and the first commit to React Router was all the way back in 2014. So it's been over 10 years that React Router has been around, and they have no plans on stopping. They just released their version 7 after 10 years, actually, and that I think there are maybe 2 breaking changes in all that time. Which is remarkable that they've been able to be so stable. But again, another reason that I'm so bullish on React Router is because the team cares so much about stability. Now, we do have a separate framework and different things, and so there are if you want to migrate between these things, and there's that. But they seem to just bring it back into React Router with minimal breaking changes. And I think that's really awesome that they care so much about that. The fact that Remix is built on top of web standards and making it so that there's less framework specific stuff that you're learning means that your knowledge transfers really nicely. I really like that Remix also cares a lot about stability. I was really bothered. I'm still bothered by the fact that Next.js kind of acquired a lot of the React team, and that made them feel like they could just ship React as part of Next.js. And so what that did was they said, well, okay, we need these features, but we're not sure that they're ready for other people to use them, just for us. And so we'll ship React as a part of Next.js. So you don't get to choose the version of React you're on. You're in Next.js, and you get whatever version of React Next.js has. And so then we can use these canary features and call them stable because you're using Next.js, you're not using React. But for everybody else, they're canary. So like it's irresponsible to use these features if you're not using them in Next.js. I strongly disagree with that approach, and that bothered me a lot. I think that they are getting away from that, but especially now that React 19 is stable. But that bothered me a lot. And the React router team or Remix team, a lot of people asked them, hey, when are you going to support React Server Components? And so Ryan built React Server Components implementation with Remix. He got it working and tested it out and found that it was actually worse than what Remix could do at the time. And so they didn't ship that because, like, even though everybody was yelling at them, hey, why don't you support RSCs? And it would be a really good competitive advantage sort of thing. The Remix team was like, no, we're not going to do something that's worse. And I respect them a lot for that. So honestly, one of the best features of Remix is the team. So.
Yeah, that was put quite nicely. I understand your concern, and I like, for example, what you mentioned about the web APIs. I feel like it's a very strong point of Remix, and that's you're, like you said, you're on MDN documentation instead of like in Remix documentation specifically, because they are very connected and it's based on the web APIs. But there's also like a balance, at least how I see it, when there's a repeatable task that is abstracted eventually, and of course you are not like only using web APIs. You create some kind of abstraction either on your own or like to with some kind of a third party package, and I feel like there is a little bit of magic, but it's probably in like every single JavaScript framework has a little bit of magic in it. But also, like, I liked your one point, and I agree completely that the request response objects should be like completely visible throughout the whole journey. I like how the next headers like simplify the way to extract, for example, cookies with automatic parsing and everything like that. But just like plugging in things without some context flowing down, it's a bit too magical for my taste. But also, like, the next team clearly listens to community, because that's something that community has also like spoken of, and they are reverting some things. For example, the fetch no longer caches by default. They're not longer like overriding the default web APIs as much, at least. But yeah, I completely agree with you on this one.
Yeah, I think that we've got to give them credit for the fact that when Next.js came out, request response on the server wasn't really much of a thing that anybody was thinking about. And so I understand that they've got old baggage that they have to kind of clear out and everything. But like you mentioned, there are a number of things that the Next.js team did, and then they decided weren't right, and they listened to the community, and I think that's good too. But that kind of also demonstrates to me some of the difference in the team, where, like, I feel like the Next.js experience is very turbulent. The Next.js and Vercel as well just seem to go back and forth on a lot of different things. Like, oh, okay, so SSG is the thing. For whatever, I can speculate some of their motives on why that was so important for them at the time. I think a lot of it has to do with their infrastructure decisions. But the fact is that they were saying to everybody, SSG, that's what you should be doing. And then, SSG is really slow. Okay, let's invent this new thing called ISR, incremental static regeneration, because this problem that we created. And then all of a sudden, no, ISR, we don't hear about that anymore, because now it's all about server rendering, and because you have RSCs. And then, you know what, there's some problems we have with that. So we're going to do this partial pre-rendering thing, PPR. So they keep on inventing things. And, now we've got caching problems. Okay, so we're going to automatically cache all of your fetch requests. People are complaining about that? Okay, let's switch that. Now we're going to this use cache directive. And I just feel like, I appreciate that they are evolving. but it seems like they are a very product-driven company, or like sales-driven, where they're very fleeting, and to me that communicates, or I just lose all the trust that what they're saying is the thing, and everybody should be doing this. What they're saying today, like that could change. Whereas the Remix team has been pretty consistent on the way that they do things. And I appreciate that stability. I think that is important. And not only that, but like they've been doing this for a really long time. They know, like, I don't know, maybe it's not how long they've been doing it, but they're just really good at this. And like they make decisions, and there may be some rough edges here or there, but they pretty much stick to the decisions that they make. There have been like a couple of things that changed the way that things work under the hood. I'm thinking about single fetch as this new feature in React Router version 7 that makes things work a little bit differently than they do in Remix version 2. But that's more of an implementation detail than anything anyway. And so, yeah, they just have been remarkably stable, whereas the next team, it just feels very volatile, and everything's changing all the time. And what's most important, and to go back to the idea of web standards being important to me, ISR is basically cache control headers set properly, and that's just standard. But they had to make up their own thing because of some of the architecture decisions that they made. Partial pre-rendering is a little bit more of an innovative thing, but still not sure that it's it actually moves the needle in the right direction. And there are web standard ways to accomplish what they're trying to do, and so I'm not super convinced that one is worth the complexity. And then again, if you wanted to self-host, if you wanted to do that anywhere but Vercel, that is an enormous amount of complexity that you're taking on yourself. So it's a feature of the framework that is vertically integrated with Vercel that would just be very difficult to do yourself. And I just think I disagree with that direction. It symbolizes some things about the framework that don't match the way that I like to build software.
Okay, I want to defend Next a little bit and touch on one of the topic you mentioned about the evolving and like fast-paced changes for Next.js. I agree, and from my perspective, it's something good. Like there's a lot of going on in the web. We are completely like right now using applications how we never did before. Like you mentioned, right? Like we mentioned before, so the PHP sites, even though we are getting a little bit close to them again, we have much more power to do whatever was previously possible in the web. But I want to just mention one thing, and I think that's a big credit for the Vercel team, that even though there was a lot of changes, there wasn't like there wasn't forcing you to use, for example, app router. You could upgrade the version and adopt it incrementally. So like your application, even though you bumped a major version of the app, was still working fine without pretty much any issues. And you just needed to, you could, if you wanted to, slowly adapt to the new framework and just check how it works for you. And for the ISR, I completely agree that this is just caching headers with branding basically on them. But it's simple and it's super powerful. And honestly, I don't think it's talked about this much right now, just because the new server-side rendering and React server components, and it's all like in the mainstream right now. But like from my personal experience, we have a lot of marketing sites that we build for the clients, and that's pretty much the goal that we are trying to achieve, to make as much of the static pages as possible, just because it's like when you host it on the CDN, you have a very cheap way to do good performance for the site, and you don't have to worry about round trips and like position of the edge versus your data sources and stuff like that. You just put everything on CDN, and it usually works for the most cases. So even though it's not talked about this much, I feel like this is still used and quite powerful.
I agree that it's powerful, but I disagree that you need to invent a new infrastructure-specific way to do that, because you can just use cache headers. And the nice thing about using the web standard cache headers is that if you have a product person come to you and say, hey, actually, we want the homepage to be different if you're logged in, now you have a choice. You can either have a client-side component that will determine, oh, are they logged in? Great, let me go and request, this extra stuff. And so now you've got a pending state on your login page, which I think is sloppy. Or if you had just gone the regular cache header route, you just say, oh, okay, well, we won't cache that anymore, and we'll just do it all on the server. And so like you have more flexibility. Now, of course, like that is going to increase your cost because now you're running compute. But if you're using Remix, then you're running that, and it's really that important to you. You could be running this on Cloudflare workers, and that basically is free. You get like, I think it's 1 million requests for 15 cents or something like that. This is like basically free. And so like that, the cost is irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. And you have a much better experience for everybody. And all that takes is just like, oh, okay, I'll remove the cache header, and everything else stays the same. So it's not so much that like they add these features and now you can adopt it if you want to, because like Remix does the same thing and React Router. Now we have loaders and actions. You don't have to use those, but you can if you want. We have server-side rendering support in React Router version 7 with the Veep plugin. You don't have to use that if you don't want to. So like it's the same sort of thing. But at least the Remix team is consistent in like focusing on web standard things, and where that's possible. Of course, like you said, sometimes you need to write abstractions, and I think that's fine. As long as those abstractions work with web standard APIs, then they're actually very nice to use. But they are like I feel like a lot of the problems that I have with Vercel and Next.js are in the marketing areas, where they say, well, this is the way that you should do it. Whereas Remix, they do say, like, this is the way that you should do it. Like, this is the best user experience that you can offer. But like and maybe it's just because I'm a part of the Remix community more than the Next.js community. But from my perspective, Remix says, we're going to give you all these levers, and you're going to pull different levers based on your use case. And I don't feel like there are various like they haven't had to walk back on stuff like Next.js has, and that just communicates something about the team to me.
Okay, just wanted to touch about one thing you mentioned about the like making the branding of revalidation instead of just using a cache header. I think it's probably a bit subjective. For me, it doesn't bother me this much, maybe because I'm a big Next.js fan. But I can really tell that we also do a lot of recruitment for our company, for the developers, and I can see that there's a trend that people now don't really know where the edge is between the Next.js and React. They don't know where the framework starts, basically. And I feel like now it's more complicated than ever, because, like, for example, React also does some features like React Server Components that require some framework to handle those. And people very often tend to mix them, but still, I feel like the decisions like that just basically blur the line between those two.
Yeah, that's another thing that bothers me. I mentioned in my post is that Next.js has kind of eaten the React team, or at least a portion of them, and that gives them it makes React less open and less collaborative. Now, since I wrote the post, it seems like that has kind of changed a little bit. Maybe that's because they're finally done with React Server Components and it's available to everybody now. But yeah, at least for a while there was this sense of exclusivity, which might sound like a point in Next.js's favor. Like if you are going to bet on a horse, you may as well be betting on the horse that has the unfair advantage, like the referee has, they're paying the referee or something. But I don't like what that did to React. So, but as yeah, I was going to say something else about that. Like I know that the Remix team is very much involved in what React is doing now, and now that React 19 is out, I feel like it's a much more level playing field, which is good.
Yeah, sure. I think it's very valuable to have these kind of conversations where you can kind of compare both of the frameworks. I think the great point also in the article was that at the end of the day, basically based on the expertise and the framework you are using, both Remix and Next are great tools, thanks to which you can build super performant UX-centric apps. So like possibly whatever you use, whether it's Remix or it's Next, it's fine as far as you have the knowledge of what you're doing. But also the one hot topic that we mentioned today a few times, the React 19 being stable. I was just wondering, maybe we can like quickly summarize, Kent, your thoughts about the React 19, and maybe just quickly, if you could like, we kind of know the answer, but maybe if you could point out one specific feature, one improvement that is like your most favorite one from the React 19 update. I think that would be super interesting.
Yeah, sure. It's hard for me to choose just one that I think is the most impactful. But if I had to, I think I would choose server components. The close second would be server functions. The ability to compose server and client code at this level has never existed ever. You can't do it like we can with server components. And this is going to open up a lot of really interesting patterns. People can definitely abuse this, and it can be used badly, and there can be mistakes and things. I think that there are a number of people who have a really bad taste in their mouth for server components, having used Next.js's implementation of them. And a lot of people really actually like the implementation that Next.js has. But I'm really looking forward to what React Router is going to do with them in the next coming months. And then eventually when Remix, the Remix brand comes back out and Reverb is officially finished and they can rename it to Remix, whatever the next version of Remix will be, I think is going to be just a killer implementation of a framework built on top of React Server Components from day one. So that would be the thing I'm most excited about.
Yeah, I think the three of us could agree that RSCs are basically the most, like the hottest topic right now. Super excited for the future software that is going to be built on top of that. And talking about the future, it's kind of hard not to talk about the tools we are getting right now. I'm talking about the specific tools that are supposed to enhance the developer productivity. And as one of the last topics today, we were super curious about your take, kind of switching topics from the React specific and the Meta frameworks world. What would be your thoughts about the usage of the kind of the generative AI tools in software development? For example, the GitHub Copilot, Cursor AI. We have so many tools like that. And I was just wondering, what would be your opinion on using those tools? Maybe the impact on developers, and maybe you have some favorite tools. General thoughts about the incoming wave of changes in the way we code every day.
Yeah. So I just recently launched a new thing on Epic Web called the Epic Web or the Epic Programming Principles, and this is just a really long document or set of principles that guide every decision that I make in software. And there's a category under developer experience, and one of the principles there is called adapt to and adopt productive tools. And I think that it's important as time goes on, people are like innovating everywhere, and it's very easy for a developer to just kind of get into the tools that they use and just stick with those when the world moves past them and develops better tools. And if they could adapt and adopt those tools, then they would be even more productive. It's easy to spin your wheels on this, so you have to be careful of that. But in general, I think that it's hugely valuable to do that. And I think there's no tool that has been released recently that is more impactful than AI and AI-assisted programming. So I use AI constantly throughout the day as I'm developing software. My current favorite is Cursor, but I've been through Copilot and SuperMaven and Codium and all of these. I also use ChatGPT a lot. And I find it to be really, really helpful. And it's like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's the worst, like it hallucinates or whatever. Yes, it does. Just like an intern would if you hired an intern. Like they don't know everything, yep. But like who's gonna like give up the opportunity to hire an intern for like $20 a month to be there? They're always available. They're very knowledgeable. They are very, very fast, and they're integrated in your editor. And they may not always get the exact answer, but that's why you're the craftsman and they're the intern. And so it has definitely made me more productive. I've definitely accepted some autocomplete from the AI that was wrong, and then that like led me down a wrong rabbit hole before. So that does happen. But I've also coded something wrong, and that led me down a rabbit hole before too. So like the AI is no better than or worse than I am, I guess. So anyway, I feel very strongly for the last 2 years, I've felt very strongly that AI-assisted programming is the future, and you need to develop those skills. So that's what I'm doing.
I want to also ask a bit about one of the articles you made. It was about AI is taking your job, and I think like you had a very interesting point, because I feel like people mostly are worried about like not the job position not being there because it's no longer needed, just because other developers are more productive, or you can just replace an intern like you mentioned. But you mentioned something completely different about people like using AI to take an advantage of another developer that could be starting a position. And I was wondering about the first scenario. So, have you noticed any, like especially where you live, any issue with like for the new junior developers to start to get into the industry because of those tools?
Well, I mean, over the last several years, well, pretty much my entire career, it's always been difficult for junior developers to get their foot in the door at their first company. Like that's just always been a challenge. And I don't think that has changed a whole lot. I think it got a little bit better leading up to COVID, and then COVID happened, and then for a while it was actually really great. Things were booming, and then it all fell apart. And now it's been really, really hard for any, or it's been quite hard for anybody to get a job. Certainly new developers. I do think that's getting better, but yeah, it's still quite hard. Now, whether AI is responsible for job loss because they're just not hiring as much. I have an optimistic view about this. I think like if we take this back to other innovations that we've had over the history of humanity, thinking about the backhoe being able to dig out ditches faster than anybody could with a shovel. Yeah, like the people who knew how to dig with a shovel couldn't dig with a shovel anymore. Like they had fewer opportunities for that. But I don't think that we dug fewer holes. We ended up digging more, right? So like, and we did just a lot more. So I think that the same sort of thing is going to happen with AI, where yeah, there will be fewer jobs to do, or fewer people needed to do the jobs we do now, but we're going to just do more. And people will be needed to fill the more that we end up doing. And so I'm optimistic about this. And the other thing is, like, yes, I can just use AI instead of hiring an intern, but guess what? So can that intern. And so they can use AI to enhance their own capabilities. And this is why I also say if you're going through my courses, I recommend that you have AI enabled, so that not because it's a way to go through it quicker or whatever, like it probably is, but you need to develop the skill, which is using an AI assistant. And that involves learning how to review the code that is generated for you and make sure that you understand what it's doing and that it's doing the right thing, and prompting the AI so that it generates something useful for you. This is a new skill that I think people need to develop, and even juniors can develop that. So no, I don't think that we're going to be in a situation where there are fewer jobs available. I just think that we're going to do more with the tools that we have now.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, one more like follow-up question here. We were also wondering about just talking about the future of the development and the development jobs. We tend to see kind of a trend, especially also considering the PESPA architecture, where the line between the traditional like front-end approach and the back-end approach, well, the line between these two blurs kind of, and especially with the adoption of frameworks such as Remix, such as Next.js, and all the other ones we have available right now. We kind of see the trend of blurring the line and kind of coming back to the more web developer position, not distinguished like the front end and the back end, but rather having a full cycle and taking care of both front end and back end aspect of the applications. And we were just wondering if you maybe have the same feelings, maybe you have seen that the trend kind of lean more towards the full stack approach. So yeah, very curious about your take on this topic.
Yeah, I've absolutely seen that trend. There are certainly people who specialize in front end and like also design related stuff. People who are way into implementing of designs and component libraries and stuff like that. Those people will continue to be needed and continue to be successful as in that sort of a focus. But product engineers, I think, are by and large going to need to have full stack capabilities, especially if they stay in the React space because of React server components. And half of your components, if not more, are going to be living on the server. And so that involves talking to a database or even like potentially working with the file system or like whatever. You are going to be doing more back-end things than you were before if you stick with React. I think this is a good thing because it is a better user experience if you do it right. Yeah. And this is actually why I bet so heavily on full stack development with Epic Web. Because I could see for myself that this is the way I want to build applications going forward. And I think that most products are going to go in this direction as well. And so if you want to upskill as a full stack developer, you can go to epicweb.dev and I'll teach you.
Yeah, sure. So we strongly encourage you guys, if you want to learn full stack development, go check out Ken's website. And I think with this question, we can slowly wrap up our episode. In summary, we've talked about numerous topics, starting from the architecture we have in the new wave of development. We've covered Next.js, Remix, the new AI trend with the tools. I think we had a great discussion with super insightful points here. So I hope our audience is going to take away a lot of knowledge from this episode. So yeah,
I do have one thing that I wanted. Sorry to interrupt.
Sure, no worries.
One thing I wanted to add just at the very end here was that article you mentioned about AI is taking your job that I wrote. I wanted to call out specifically what that article was about. So it wasn't about there being fewer jobs and things, but it was about how people are using AI to filter resumes that are submitted, and they're using AI to generate resumes to submit. So they're on both sides of the recruiting fence. And in the future, and even now, in my past, even the best way to get a job is to have a personal connection, like a real conversation, real human connection. And every job that I've gotten has been through a personal connection, and even in person. And I think that becomes even more and more relevant now that like the only difference between you and an AI generated resume is that you're a real person that you can like connect with the person that is on the other side of the table. And so I have my events. I have Epic Web Conf and Epic Web Camp that are both focused on making in-person connections. And I strongly recommend that people take advantage of like the human advantage that you have over AI, making those kinds of relationships happen, because it's going to become increasingly important as we go forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. People will always want to work with people and not with the machines. I hope that if AI in the future won't take that quote to do something wrong with me. But a small anecdote about like recruiters using the CVs and the AI to check CVs. I've also heard about it, and it's I heard that it's a common way right now to try to prompt inject inside of the CVs. So you write something with the white font on the white background, like saying that I am the best candidate or something like that. So yeah, it's a crazy world we're living in right now.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, sure. I think that perfectly would sum up our conversation. So once again, Kent, thank you so much for finding the time to be here with us. I think we had a great conversation with a lot of great insights. So yeah, we are honored to have you here on the podcast. Thank you so much again for finding the time. And yeah, hopefully maybe we're gonna see face-to-face on the next conference in Krakow in Poland. Would absolutely love that. So yeah, thank you from my side.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and
thank you.
I think we can slowly wrap up the episode. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Bye.